Step 1 of spiritual alchemy is calcination, which is the process of reducing the ego that is in the way of our own happiness to ashes. In a way, step 1 of chemical alchemy represents the process of heating and decomposing raw matter until it's reduced to ashes. The glimmering gold has to undergo several extensive steps to let go of its impurities. Calcination challenges the persona, bringing the stagnant energy to light, so that the spirit can blend with the physical. The egoic self enters a form of existential crisis where our complete worldview undergoes reconstruction. In this initial step of spiritual alchemy, we confront and accept the discomfort of the process, leading us to realize that the bonds formed through the limited mind are not a genuine reflection of our innermost essence, enabling us to relinquish them. We start to realize that the mind does not reflect who we really are. We become aware of the ego's self-doubt, self-sabotage, and pride in order to break down these impurities. We become aware that the ego is not who we really are. Just like the process of chemical alchemy, where impurities are reduced to ashes through fire, in a similar way, we reduce the ego and see the ego for what it is. Often, we'd rather be right or fulfill an idea of perfection than be truly happy. So we continue neglecting the deep exploration of ourselves. This is a false identity or ego that we allow to fight desperately for its survival. Calcination refers to breaking down attachment to our ego-based beliefs, which is the worldly drive to seek those things that feed our ego or perceptions of our own identity, wealth, status, pride, and arrogance. We face a crisis of identity. We start to break down the materia prima, which is first matter or primal material. It is the burning of the materia prima into ash. It is the step in which impurities are reduced to ashes, like the mirage that they are, to refine the character and bring balance into our life. Ultimately, it is the path to our freedom. The ego fights desperately for its own survival. Awakening requires radical honesty, courage, and the willingness to let go of all that you are not. Courage to claim change and choose to journey on a path of self-exploration. In this step of spiritual alchemy, it is crucial to see the ego for what it is and realize that we are so much more than that. In this step of spiritual alchemy, it is key to see the ego for what it is and realize that we are so much more than that. Calcination incinerates the ego's defenses against the unknown. As our cherished beliefs and habits turn to ash and smoke, we may feel as if we're lost. The ego dies to patterns we have outgrown. Space is created for us to begin to realize more of our true reality and who we really are behind the noise of the mind. The ego is actually identification with form, which primarily means thought forms. It is basically your identity, or who you think you are. It is usually constructed of a name, personality, and story, which is a collection of memories, beliefs, ideas, and sensations about who you are, where you came from, and what you've experienced. When we identify with a thought or story in our mind, the ego is born. Duality is the very substance of the ego. We essentially divide life into words, ideas, and beliefs that ultimately suffocate the present moment. Duality can only ever exist through the mind. It is essentially the state of separation, believing that we are separate. It is the veil between who we truly are and what we think we are. We live in the illusion of the mind, totally unaware that we are directed by all the stories the ego tells. Remember, we are not defined by the ego. The ego is not who we are. Thoughts are simply things, just like any other thing that has been created. The ego protects itself and fervently guards the belief that you're separate. The discovery that everything you believe is you is actually false can be unsettling. So don't be surprised if you experience a lot of resistance to this video. It's actually normal. As a product of living in duality, we create massive amounts of suffering for ourselves because we're no longer open to the endless vastness and oneness of life. Our lives are then centered around condemning, judgment, and fear. The more deeply we're entrenched in duality, the more we experience problems such as hatred, anger, depression, paranoia, anxiety, and many other states of being. Anything in us that we perceive as being evil, bad, wrong, or sinful, we suppress and deny. As a result of this repressed energy, our illusory self grows more and more twisted and destructive. This intense suffering is ultimately expressed in our relationships and the world around us. We are drowning in the ego. In almost every nook and cranny of the spiritual field, you'll hear the ego spoken about with contempt and sometimes even demonized. Many people carry the belief that the ego needs to be destroyed, muzzled, or even killed, but this is just a reflection of the mind stuck in duality. The ego is simply a tool. It is a biological, physiological, and social survival mechanism. Without it, we couldn't function in the world. We need our egos to operate in the physical body. We need to understand that the ego isn't good or bad. Whether the ego creates pain or happiness is all up to how we use it. The ego is also important because it exists as a vehicle for our spiritual growth. It can serve as doorways through which we can awaken to our true nature. Those who are enlightened enlightened don't actually lose their ego. They simply stop identifying with it. The ego blends with the true self. The ego is a teacher that you carry with you every day. When seen in this light, the ego is the most powerful and persistent teacher. When we step back in conscious awareness, we realize that the limited mind does not truly represent our core essence, enabling us to release our attachment to it. We unveil the illusion and disidentify with the ego. Stay tuned for step 2 of spiritual alchemy, coming soon in this 7-step spiritual alchemy series. Thanks for watching. If you found this content valuable, please subscribe and click the like button below. Your feedback is important as it helps me create more helpful videos for you. You will also help this channel reach a wider audience across the globe.